Welcome to the Locksmith Security Network. LSN is your powerful resource, hosted by Winton for all things locksmith and security. All righty, we are recording, and this is the Locksmith Security Network podcast. Today, my special guest is Bryan Armstrong. Bryan and I have been friends and known each other for quite a long time. What's it been now, about 7 or 8 years?
Yeah, I'd say the better part of a decade, one way or another.
Right. We've known each other for a long time. You're over there on the eastern slope. I'm kind of right in the middle. And we always see each other at trade shows and whatnot, and like to go try and have a meal at least once a year and connect with a lot of the other locksmiths in the community. And that's what I really like about you, is you're a community-based locksmith. And go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself, and go ahead and introduce yourself here.
Okay. My name is Bryan Armstrong. I'm the owner of Elbert County Key Works in Elizabeth, Colorado. I have been in the industry as a commercial and institutional locksmith for 28 years, and spent most of that time, working in the field for various companies along the way, and now trying to make my way doing my own thing.
That's right. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because I know that there are so many other people in your position, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about more as to where your career has progressed and where you're at right now. But the main summary is that you were working for other companies, and then other companies, as with many times with other companies, sometimes they need to downsize. You're not really in control of your future as an employee or technician with some of these other companies, and you're kind of at the will of how the ownership is going to want to run things. And if things are booming and doing well, then you can do extremely well. But sometimes we experience a time of contraction, and in those cases, you just don't know where you sit on that totem pole until you know where you sit on the totem pole, if you will. So, but we'll get to that. But you've started your own business, and there are so many people who are in that position where they've worked for somebody, or they were institutional, or they had something secure, and then that security was yanked out from underneath them. And there's a lot of fear going out on your own. It is very, very, very scary. I mean, entrepreneurship is not for everybody.
It's extremely intimidating, and especially when you consider the idea that you step into this situation, and you have this tremendous trade skill, and but what you may not have is that mind of an accountant, or that understanding of fiscal law, or the various things that are so necessary in running a business. You have to be an accountant, you have to be an administrator, you have to be able to manage time and people and customers and accounts. And so the most intimidating part of that is when you've spent years and years and years successfully plying your trade, and you find yourself awash in the in the ocean of all the other things that you have to learn to run a business. And in the last I started Elbert County Key Works on February 11th of this year, and the learning curve has been excruciatingly steep.
Yeah, I can totally attest to that. It reminds me of my situation to some degree, that I came out of the oil field and construction and heavy equipment, and it was basically, I didn't run a business. I didn't know how to run a business at 20. I was in my late 20s, and I had to learn the trade, learn the industry, and learn how to run a business, all within this very narrow 30-day time window. And if I didn't figure it out, boy, that was going to end very, very horribly wrong. So I know that fear. I feel that intimidation, because I've been there myself. And that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on, because it's a different day. Starting a business when I did in 2012 is a whole lot different story than starting a business now. In 2025, it's a completely different roadmap.
Absolutely.
And Yeah, I just want to kind of get some of the where did you find some of the tools? Who did you listen to, and where did you get some of these pieces of information?
Well, as I had made a couple of calls to you just for some advice, but ultimately, the scariest part of starting all this, and I'll get to the tools momentarily because it's all very relevant. The scariest part about this is you start a business and you are filing taxes within 90 days. You know, there is no grace period. When if you're starting a business and you're charging people sales tax, uh, there's a big issue there. But um, the tools I use to start my business, and this process started on February the 7th, and I started my business by February 11th. So if you have motivation and a little pocket money and the time, this is a process that's accessible to anyone. The first and foremost thing is I needed to protect my personal assets. And that involved, so the first thing was to decide how I was going to incorporate my business. And of course, for that, I chose an LLC because that separates. And I filed as a LLC partnership with my wife so that she could have access to all of the financials, so that if something happened to me, all of this could be broken down without any major problem. But I did that so that I could protect my personal assets because I am working out of my home. You can see in the background, my basement office. This is in my home. The vehicle that I'm using to do this job, it is owned privately. And so, should I be, sued, and my liability insurance is not enough to handle everything, this protects my personal assets. So nobody's going to be able to take my home away from me. They're not going to, they may be able to take the business assets, but they cannot take my personal assets. So that's one of the most important things. And there are various tools available. The one I've happened to use was LegalZoom because I was fairly comfortable with the process to start with. That cost me about $450.
That's
They
that's really good. If you would have paid an attorney, it would have been a lot more.
Absolutely. And, I would encourage anybody, LegalZoom was very thorough. And I'm not plugging them really, but it was thorough enough that it did a number of AI generated scans to tell me, okay, well, these are the licenses you may need, and some various things like that. So they were able to get my documentation squared away with the Secretary of State immediately. So that process is automated, and I had my Colorado tax ID within 24 hours. The second thing I had to do was get an EIN number. LegalZoom was able to handle that, but I did that personally. Um,
Mhm.
you have EIN stands for Employment Identification Number. I'm not employing anyone, but I still needed the number.
Yeah.
So that handles your business at the federal level.
Mhm.
Both of those things were done through LegalZoom very quickly.
Yeah.
Um, I operate in a major metro area. I live in Elizabeth, which is in Elbert County, about 30 miles south of Denver, but I do a significant amount of work in Denver. And Denver, Broomfield, and several other municipalities out here are home rule municipalities, which means that the state of Colorado does not collect taxes for them. That means you have to pay your taxes directly to those municipalities if you do work for them. So the next step that I had to take was to, once I had my Colorado sales tax license through the Secretary of State, then I had to identify all of the areas I was working in, which required direct payment. And I had to get sales tax licenses in those areas. So that in my area, that's Denver, Broomfield, Boulder, Douglas County as of next year, and a couple other minor municipalities. But that could all be done online through the state of Colorado. Actually, their website is very, very supportive.
Yeah.
The next thing that I had to handle was, excuse me. The next thing that I had to handle was, how do I pay taxes in all of these places? Because honestly, what a lot of locksmiths seem to do out here is they go to the supplier and they pay the sales tax on the parts they purchase, and they don't
Mhm.
charge that to the customer. But that's been established in court to not be an acceptable way to manage. A lot of guys are getting in trouble for that now. So if you're considering just paying the sales tax when you purchase your parts, I would highly encourage it against that. I've consulted a lawyer on that, and That's a very, very poor idea. But there is a tool. The state of Colorado has a website that all you do is plug in your zip code, and it tells you exactly how much in taxes you need to collect for every municipality you work in. So I have 74 different tax structures in my in my QuickBooks right now. There were some mistakes. And if you're talking about tools, a lot of people, you have to figure out how you're going to collect that payment. And I made the mistake of starting with Square. And that was one of the biggest mistakes I could have made because they're charging me almost 20% at
Ooh.
this point. Now, what they also do is, they have a great collection platform, but they make it extremely difficult to export any of that data into, say, if you're using, QuickBooks on your desktop. It's
Right.
almost impossible to export, and the numbers never match up because Square spends some time making some Square math. So,
Okay.
if given this to do over again, I likely would use QuickBooks. Uh,
Online.
yeah,
The
I
app.
would start with QuickBooks Online because they are discontinuing the desktop version.
Yeah.
And I would also use their merchant services because it integrates seamlessly.
With itself.
And yes, with itself, absolutely. So, and then you can export to your tax professional, and it all works out much better.
Yeah.
But as far as tools go, that was my primary challenge, was just figuring out how to take money and tax money. And that is very intimidating. And I had to file my first business taxes last week.
Mm.
So I was in business for less than 3 months before I had to pay taxes. Um, so when you're reviewing your tools to starting a business, there are a lot of tools available. But my advice is to make absolutely sure that whatever you choose is integrated, fully integrated, front to back.
Yeah.
Square does not do well. Venmo was an absolute nightmare. The minute I started my account with Venmo, they suspended it. Within a minute and a half of the account going live, I got a suspension notice.
Wow.
So,
They're
yeah,
like
without ever
Google.
having taken a dime or any of that. So I,
Wow.
I really suggest that anybody looking into the business use a legitimate banking merchant service.
Yeah, yeah, and let's break that down just for a little bit here. So, just from my experience as well, and I mean, anybody who I've ever provided any kind of business coaching to, the first two things you need are you need a qualified attorney or attorney service. Legal Zoom, Legal Shield, any of those companies. I mean, even ChatGPT can write you up something fairly basic.
Absolutely.
Do something. Do not rely on your own knowledge. Get some professional help in the legal department. These are not expenses. These are going to save you thousands of dollars and time later
And they're
on.
tax deductible. Don't ever
Right.
forget that. That's
Yeah.
anything you spend on those services is a legitimate tax
Oh, yeah.
deduction. And in the long run, you will see that back.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It saves me. My attorney saves me tens of thousands of dollars. And then on top of that, my second recommendation is a good qualified CPA. You need to
Mhm.
have somebody, and it depends on what level. Like you can break down where you want to be at with the books. I'm not a real book savvy person, so I have a bookkeeper and a CPA. But CPA is always number one. You want to make sure you have somebody who's going to be the one filing your taxes, who's going to be on point, who's the one that comes up with, yeah, here's not only is it here's the state tax, here's the county tax, here's the city tax, right?
Yep,
There's layers. And then if you're like in some areas, there's one city where there's two county lines in between the two city, and I got to know where I'm at to be able to
absolutely.
charge which one. And that gets very, very, very complicated. And I would have no clue about that if it wasn't for a qualified and competent. I want to add that second caveat
Competency.
to it, the
Absolutely.
competent
Well,
CPA as well. And then I have a bookkeeper that kind of really, I hate doing paperwork. So I have a bookkeeper, and the bookkeeper charges way less than a CPA. So she basically makes sure that everything is immaculate, does all the dirty work. A lot of times people's wives will help out, and they may not need that bookkeeper kind of middle person. But yeah, it's me, bookkeeper, and then CPA. and then that keeps my butt out of hot water with the
Right.
tax people. I do not want to have an audit, and if I do have an audit, I want to have a clean audit to where, hey, we're above board, we've got everything on the books. I told my CPA and my bookkeeper, here's what I'm paying you to do. Make sure we don't get audited. And if we get audited, make sure that it's a smooth, clean process, because that has ended businesses, companies, careers. It'll
No
make
cutting
people go
corners and no
insane.
chicanery.
Yes.
Don't even try. If you're not
Nope.
prepared, if you're
Nope.
not absolutely prepared
Yeah.
to take on those responsibilities, don't start the business.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, when you start an LLC,
Mm-hmm.
there is a section of that you have to declare your responsible party when it comes to taxation. And so, declaring yourself as that responsibility, or I'm sorry, that responsible person is a very poor idea. You
Yeah.
choose your bookkeeper, you choose your
CPA.
CPA, and you list them,
Yeah.
because that when taxation problems happen, they're going to go straight to that person first.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you're always responsible for your own business,
Yeah.
but there are protections built into that filing that are going to help you if you do it right.
Exactly. Exactly. And I've got a little bit of a story that I really don't like telling, because it makes me, I was not the proper leader that I needed to be at one particular point in time. And I actually had a very poor bookkeeper, and that ended up, basically what happened is they weren't paying payroll taxes.
Hmm.
And then I got a nasty gram from the IRS. But by the time I got that, there was, I mean, this wasn't a couple $1,000s. This was over $10,000.
Uh-huh.
And it was very, very, very bad. And by the time we caught it, now we've got to hurry up. And I always put money away in another tax account. That's a really, really good tip too. And I don't know if you're doing that. You seem really savvy, you seem really smart, so I'm sure you are. But I always have a tax account that is just for that. It is a reserve pond account, and as money comes in, that just goes right over into there, and money just trickles into there as a percentage of what comes in over what we would normally need to pay, so that there's an
Yes.
abundance of money in there. Because the last thing you want to get, the last thing you want to have happen is get caught with your pants down with the IRS.
Right.
They
And
do not play.
one of the things that I had, so I went through Ant Credit Union as my business banker, and
Mhm.
they have the option that you can actually set up and delete accounts within your main account in seconds. So the first thing I did is I have one account extension that says tax dollars do not touch.
Do not
And
touch.
yep, so 30% right off the top goes straight into that account, no matter what.
Beautiful. That's great. So that right there is something that everyone needs to listen to. 30% just goes straight into that tax account, and it just stays there, and it's meant to do that and pay taxes. That is not your money. You cannot spend it. If you do, you are going to get in hot water, and the tax man's coming for you, and they will seize assets. Like if you owe payroll taxes, they will come take your truck. It doesn't matter whether you have an LLC or not. They will
No, it
come take
doesn't.
your vehicles. They'll come take your house. They'll come sell your stuff. I mean, they will
Yeah.
shut you
What
down.
you can get sued for and what the government can do are two totally different things. The
Oh,
government will take
yes.
they'll get their pound of flesh no matter what.
No
And
matter
by the
what.
way, it's also worth noting for anybody getting started is that not only do you have to pay that sales tax, you have to pay income tax.
Mhm.
You have to pay income tax. You take your money, you pay yourself, and that's called an owner's draw. When you
Yep.
take that owner's draw, you're not just paying income tax on your owner's draw, you're paying income tax on every dime that is not deductible in your business. So
Mhm.
if you decide that you're going to pay yourself $10 this year and try to operate off your company funds, it doesn't matter where that money is, whether it's in a company account or a personal account, that you
It's
still owe that tax.
profit's
And
profit. If you make profit,
right,
you pay in taxes. That's all
whether
there is
you're
to it.
whether it's in your pocket or in the company's coffers, it doesn't matter, you're paying income tax on it. So and I'll say it over and over again, no cut corners, no chicanery, because that will
No.
end you faster than anything.
Yeah.
And I found that out early in the game, because this isn't my first business. I started a company called Armstrong Lock and Key back in 2006,
Mhm.
and it died within a year because
Wow.
I didn't follow the rules.
Wow. Wow. So you learned a lot of things from that, and now you're prepared. You've surveyed the land, and you know where all those pitfalls are right now. You know not to step on that booby trap.
Right. I mean, and we've just started the scratching the surface. Starting a company. It's
Yeah, yeah. These are the big pitfalls that will just swallow you whole if you
yeah.
don't pay attention and honor and respect them for that. The Locksmith Security Network podcast is completely
LSN Securing Tomorrow today.
This all on my own from beginning to finish. I sign up the guests, film, edit, and produce everything on my own. We offer electronic access control installation on-demand classes, so if you are interested in supporting the channel, we show you all of the tools that are required to install access control, including installing electronic strikes, both cut-in and surface mount, like you see here, and highly complex electronic access control systems installed on solid glass doors, including running wire cleanly and organized, installing door operators like this LCN 6440XP door operator to make you some serious green. If you are interested in furthering your career, check out the link below. I'd like to take a step back just a little bit, and maybe let's start out. Where did you start out in your career? And let's talk about that a little bit. And maybe let's talk about where you were, and then how did you get where you are now?
Are you talking about how I got into the industry to begin with?
Yeah. Let's
Okay.
go all the way back to the beginning.
Oh boy. Well, you know what? My professional career started in 1999. But I actually was learning way prior to that. I lived in a little town in North Texas called Borger, and the guy living about 3 doors up from us, this old guy named Don Rice. He was the only locksmith in Hutchinson County, Texas, and uh, unfortunately, I was a pretty heavily bullied kid. And one day he stepped out on the front porch while I was getting kicked around by the neighborhood boys, and he broke it up and he pulled me into his house, and he had absolutely no idea how to handle an 11-year-old boy that was, beat up and crying. So he sat me down at his workbench and started showing me how to work on locks. So, I had a couple of years as a small child, kind of learning the ropes a little bit. And then, we moved, came to Colorado. I went to high school. And of course, you know, uh, we've told our kids for decades now that the only way to be successful is to go to business and go to college. And so, of course, I left high school and immediately jumped into the academic, grinder. Um, and failed miserably, by the way. But I started locksmithing. I walked into a shop in downtown Denver, and this was after I had failed miserably at my first professional attempt to do, what I was learning to do. And I'd remembered something my father said. He said, "Go to school, go to a trade, or go to school and go and learn, but also learn a trade, because you will have to fall back on it."
Yeah.
So I was bemoaning my fate walking down the main drag through Denver, down Broadway, and there was a shop there called Master Key and Lock. And a lot of guys around the industry might know Mike Hensley, who ran that at the time. And I walked in, said, "Hey, are you guys hiring?" And the guy at the dispatch desk threw a master number one and a diamond-headed HPC pick and a tension wrench at me and said, "If you can figure out how to pick that lock in the next hour, I'll hire you." And I said, "Okay." So I fiddled and faddled and raked it open, and I had a job. And
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I like that too. I like the way you hire the interview process.
It was a very, very short interview process. And Master did automotive, they did residential, they did commercial, they did everything. They were the last of that breed of shops that does everything. And so I started learning, automotive and residential, and I got caught in. And you're probably, I don't know, Wayne. You may not have ever got caught in this cycle, but technicians tend to caught into this cycle of the 4-cylinder residential rekey, and that's all they do for years and years and years. 4 doors a quick set and move on to the next 8 times a day. And,
no, I never got caught in that. I'm too ADHD, man. I got to see something different every day. And in my area, it's high-end Aspen, is multi-point this, and I always wanted, every time my every industry I was ever in, I focused on what's the top paying position and how do I get there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, well, and locksmiths are a funny bunch. A lot of them tend to want to withhold knowledge, or during this era they did. You had that one guy with every company that did all the heavy commercial work and didn't want anybody else getting in on that because that was going to take his bonuses or whatever. You had that one guy that did all the automotive work, and then everybody else just ran around and did neighborhood rekeys.
And the
And I
safe
got
guy.
caught. Yeah. And I got caught in that cycle for the better part of a decade, and
Mm,
it frustrated me so deeply. So I moved around a lot to different places that would teach me different things, and I finally in 2007, when when transponder keys on cars became more of a thing, I kind of made a decision professionally, because at the time I was 425 pounds,
mm.
and I was not doing well tearing down door panels and crawling under dashes. So I
Yeah.
decided I was not going to touch automotive anymore.
Mm-mm.
So I dropped automotive in 2007 and kind of never went back, which look at me coming full circle now. Um, but I started putting pressure on my employers. Get me
Yeah.
into commercial. Get me into commercial. I'm tired of this.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I moved along enough times through enough. Let me say this, because you can talk about your career, and you have a couple ways you can go, but every shop I worked for, with the exception of one, every employer that I've done business with, every person I've worked for has been a good uh a good businessman and a good locksmith. And so seeking out new knowledge, it does not mean that you have contention with with the companies you're working with.
Right.
But when you work with enough small family outfits, you have to break the pattern sometimes. And so I grew and grew and grew, and finally got into commercial and institutional locksmithing, and I thrived there because so many of the guys doing that don't have a good knowledge of life safety code, fire code, things like that, and I thrived on that learning.
Yeah.
So that finally, I went through maybe 5 or 6 companies over my career, and finally, the last iteration of me, being completely dependent on somebody else for my bread and butter, was a company called ETG Systems, and they were a government contractor for access control. And it was kind of interesting how I expanded my role there. I came in because I wanted to learn a little access control. You start getting into your 30s, and you realize that you kind of have to make a choice. You're going to keep learning, or you're going to stagnate.
Right.
And when I started with ETG, I was 40, and I was realizing that the chances were, if I didn't keep growing and keep growing quickly, then I was never going to get any higher than I was. So I went out to pull wire on a job in Durango, and this was a job. It was about 46 doors at a school, and our company, prior to my employment, had installed some standalone keypads on some sergeant bars,
Mm-hmm.
and the way they did that installation appeared to have been with a chainsaw.
Oh no. They didn't
Um,
believe in jigs.
no, and they didn't believe in subtlety. So I went to the owner of the company. I said, for a variety of reasons, this kind of work cannot stand. And the first question out of his mouth was, "What would you know about it, Mister Wire Puller?" And so, "Well, you must not have looked at that resume I sent you very well. This has been my specialty for the better part of 3 decades. So if you'd care to have this fixed and look a little better, to the customer, let me know." So I went back to pulling wire, and about 3 days later, I got pulled into the office, and he said, "Okay, so talk to me more about locksmithing."
Right. And I just want to plant this in there. Like, a lot of people recognize me, and I'm on the socials, and I do a lot of stuff, and I share a lot of stuff, and I try and help a lot of people. I would not challenge your authority when it comes to hardware installation. If you told me, Wayne, that is not installed properly, I would say, yes, Bryan, how can I fix this and make it correct? I want to just put that out there 100%. I know we have had many a dinner, and we have, chatted about a lot of different jobs. You know what you're talking about. You really, really do. I'm
We've
very
had a
impressed
lot
by
of
your
talk about ethics and a lot of talk about quality craftsmanship and the interplay between the two.
Yes.
And I had that very same conversation with the gentleman that ran that company. And at the end of that conversation, I was the director of Division 8 for his company. And and so after that, my career was almost entirely working within the bid sphere, collecting bid solicitations, walking sites, project engineering, large scale schools, government buildings, military bases, and so when I ended my career with ETG, I'd gained a crash course in life safety planning, egress planning, code compliance,
Yep. Yep.
and the actual mechanical skill sets become almost irrelevant to the process. The process is, bureaucracy. Oh, so and that led to the current political situation. The government started getting hacked at with a hatchet, and lots of contracts went away. And so here I was, happily sitting at my desk and controlling my environment, and there's a knock on my office door saying contracts have disappeared, and now it's time for you to do the same. So and a lot of that came about because this company was a access control company, and they still did not see the value of advanced hardware support in access control.
Right. And now I want to just kind of take a look at that arc. So I mean, your career's kind of cruising along, right? And then you're making little bumps up, and then all of a sudden you get this major opportunity to where you get this huge spike to where you're the man. Like, that's where you want to be. You want to be in project management. You got air conditioned, climate control. You don't come home full of
$70
metal
million
stuck.
and yeah.
Right. You don't come home, with just all the stuff that's associated with climbing on ladders and pulled shoulders and just all the stuff, just like I said, coming home covered in metal and drill filings and just all the stuff that comes with installing, and being a great installer is great. And I still do a lot of hardware installation, but I can tell you that it's not my favorite thing. It's not something I want to be doing when I'm 50. So you kind of got this really nice, cushy job. And just when you're at the apex, life knocks on your little door and says, oh boy, we've got another surprise for you. And now you're going to have to contend with that when you were just getting comfortable.
Right. And, success is thriving on adversity.
That's it.
And
if you look at it that way, if you look at it as the world's always out to get you, then the world's always out to get you. But if you look at it like you just said it, whenever one door shuts, another door opens, and you can see it as that, and you can get the gift and move on, then thrive on that adversity, then you will be successful.
Use it as a lever, and add that to the long list of advisory quips from yours truly. Adversity is going to come. Use it as a lever, because if you play it right, overcoming that adversity is going to be added to your resume.
Yep. And then you're going to come out no matter what. I've had, people look at me and they're like, oh, he's successful and he's doing this and he's all over the internet and he's doing this and he's doing that. And it looks like everything is very, very well put together and that I don't have any problems. And I can tell you that is absolutely not the case. I have had weeks on end where I didn't know if I was going to make payroll at some points in time. I've had so much stress that I would sweat out the sheets, just night stress sweating, just like freaking out. Like, what am I going to do with this? But that's the brain working the Rubik's Cube, trying to solve the problem. What resources do I have? And how can I apply them to the current problem at hand to get out on the other side, to get me some breathing room? And then we can learn from that experience, rebuild. Whenever you break a bone, that's the strongest spot. So that's the mindset that you got to have going into it. But trust me, there's nothing fun about a broken arm either while it's happening.
Right. And, and that brings up a subject that we can cover, in due course, but diversifying your services.
Yes. Multiple streams of income. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is where, that's the big thing that we've been talking about. I was lucky enough to be on a couple panels with Locksmith Ledger. And that was the big thing is RMR. How can I get service contracts? How can I get service agreements? How can we basically kind of, the big one going on out there right now is the big G, the big Google word. Your account can disappear like that for no reason.
I've never been able to get mine started, and we've had some
I
minor.
I was going to ask you about that a little bit, but
they decided initially that my business hours were just not convenient for them, so no Google listing whatsoever right now.
Yeah. And a lot of people are facing that. You're trying to put everything you can into this. You're putting all your time. You're working way more than 8 hours a day. 8 hours a day was like, years ago. That's not happening when you're a business owner. And then, your money, your savings, you're self-funding this. I didn't see a GoFundMe for Bryan Armstrong anywhere.
No. And that's a whole subject on how did I, fund and start this thing.
We'll jump right into it. Go ahead. Tell us.
First of all, full disclosure, at this point, I'm working a day job too. My business isn't self-sufficient right now, but it doesn't have to be. And that was sort of part of the plan. So over the last 28 years, I've collected equipment, because I knew from the time I was about 25 that I was eventually not going to be happy working for someone else anymore. And so I was in a very unique position with this startup. One, I do not have to be completely self-supporting with this right now, because I have another friend that's a locksmith up north who desperately just needed some help and needed the skill sets that I had. So I go up there and work for him during the week and make a fairly steady paycheck with it. But
Great.
that being said, not everybody's going to have that option.
Right.
So the way that I got started was I started leveraging some assets. I own a house and all that, so we took a HELOC to do some home maintenance, and I realized that there was enough left in that HELOC that what is the biggest piece of equipment every locksmith has to get before they go on the road?
A truck.
Absolutely.
Gotta have a
So
van.
I went down to the local government auction. I picked up an all-wheel drive Express with a nice heater in the back, and I
Paid
paid
cash,
for it.
no debt.
Paid for it in full. Yep,
Yeah,
that was
no debt.
exactly.
That's a big one. Big one.
And these government auctions.
They're great.
And what's that?
They're great. You can get awesome equipment, and they service it. I mean, for the most part, they service their equipment very well. It's just like police cars and fire trucks and stuff like that. Like they got nothing better to do than roll that thing into the shop and get it fixed and serviced. And
well, and that brings up your second biggest startup expense, and that's upfitting. And so I walked that auction. I didn't see exactly what I liked, but I saw something on their list that I thought would work out for me. Turns out they had sold it to a reseller down the street. So I worked out a little deal. I went and found it. It had all the bench work in it already. It had a hookup for an inverter. And so I started with a fully capable rig. It wasn't new. It's got about 130,000 miles on it, but I guarantee you, decently maintained vehicle, even if it's not the best vehicle out there, is going to make you enough that you can start stepping up. So
Right.
you don't have to start with the brand new Highboy Transit. And it was really important to me to make sure that my vehicle was a professional looking vehicle, because that is the number one way that scammers can be picked out of the crowd, is working out of the back of a Honda hatchback or
Trunk
something like
slammers.
that. Yeah,
The trunk
and
snammers.
that's not to say you can't be a legitimate locksmith working out of the back of a vehicle. My first locksmithing vehicle was an S10 Blazer. Um,
I had a Subaru, man.
right. You can do the work, but ultimately optics are extremely important in today's market. And so after acquiring that van, it was just a matter of pulling all this old equipment out of my garage
Yep.
and starting to load up. And, a, a lot of guys that are trying to start a business in a locksmithing business, do the Foley Belsaw school. And, what is the name of that curve? Low knowledge, high confidence, medium
The
knowledge,
bell
low
curve.
right. And so, if you're going to start this, be on the high end of that curve. High knowledge and low confidence is better than high confidence and no knowledge.
When that just to kind of interject a little bit right here, when people ask me all the time, because my specialty is safe work, safe and vault work, and people ask, well, how do I get into that? I want to do more of that work. That work looks really cool. It looks really fun. And I'm like, yeah, it is. So they're like, well, what are the first tools I need to buy? Education. Go get some
Absolutely.
classes, because I don't care
Absolutely.
what tools you buy. You can have all the strong arm drill bits and drill rigs, and you can have all of the magic little boxes. If you don't know how to apply those tools correctly, you are wasting your money and you are wasting your time.
Right. And that brings me into that whole thing about automotive work that I promised myself I was never going to do again after 2007. Yeah, yours truly has a KM100 sitting in the van now, but I refuse to touch it until I get the learning.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I could take that KM100, plug it into somebody's car, and make a universal key run the car. Unfortunately, that's what 90% of the auto locksmith scammers in Denver are doing right now. I don't want to be them. And and I mean, we've digressed a little from the startup, but
No.
the bottom.
That's fine. We're on the right path. It's actually a really, really good point, because I want people that are starting their businesses are going to watch this, and they're going to need to listen, and they're going to need to hear a customer's car or a customer's property is not your education opportunity.
No.
And that really needs to be driven home with a 10-pound sledgehammer.
And also legitimacy, because my wife, she works in insurance. She works for Travelers Insurance. And the first thing she said is, "Are you going to be working on cars with this business?" I said, "Well, not right now, no." She said, "Well, the minute you do, you tell me, because you need a garage owner's policy." Because it doesn't matter whether you take possession of a vehicle. It doesn't matter if you do it on your property or at the customer's property. If you touch a customer's vehicle, you have to have a separate insurance policy
Wow.
for damage to a vehicle. And I would encourage anybody who is going into the industry to work on cars, don't stop with your business liability insurance, because your $1 million business liability policy will not help you if you touch somebody's car. And one of the most common problems an automotive locksmith is going to face is they go in there, they do that programming, security system goes off, and oh boy, you got an ECM failure, and $5,000 in repairs.
Brick. A
Yep.
big brick.
Right, which is why I won't touch a car until I get that education and until I get my garage owner's policy.
There you go, right there. So right here, we've got somebody who's got 28 years in the industry, who is one of the most knowledgeable people that I've ever come in contact with. I mean, if I ask you a question, you either give me a definitive answer, and that is the correct answer, or you say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And the
Not
fact
my
that
bailiwick.
Right. And the fact that you have the humility to be able to do that and to say that, and to be able to, I respect the fact that you're willing to not accept something or not answer something if you don't have a definitive answer, and you are saying that you are not just grabbing a programmer and a key machine and just jumping out there and just starting to do automotive work. That is not the way that you do it. And anybody that's doing that is doing themselves, and they're doing the entire industry a very, very, very big disservice by doing so. Go to the proper channels, and education is not an excuse anymore. Yeah, back in the 80s and 90s, sure, you had to wait to go to an Aloha convention, or you had to wait for some kind of convention like that to get that knowledge. With all the manufacturer's knowledge right now, on-demand training, every supplier's got a trade show, an education seminar all across the country all year long. There are no excuses for that.
Spend the money, travel, take the class, and walk away with a certification that you can rely on. And I'm not and don't go to the cheapest class you can find. Educate yourself from the people with reputations. It's so important to get the right education, because we've all heard of the correspondence locksmith school, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's no substitute for hands-on. You can't learn this. You cannot learn in totality effectively with video education, in my personal
And get a
opinion.
mentor.
Yeah.
Get a mentor, because education doesn't stop in the classroom. You get in the field, find somebody around you that knows what they're doing, and strike up a deal with them, and get mentorship, because there will always be that thing that you have not run into before that they have. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Man, we are just covering so many good points here. I couldn't have put it better. That's why I wanted to have you on here, because as soon as we touch on one thing, it sparks up another idea. Anybody who's out there trying to start a business or thinking about starting a business, if you have not listened to this podcast, this is gold. This is liquid gold. You are getting a master class in business development and startup 101. I would normally charge, this is probably 2 or 3 business coaching sessions that would be worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And I'm happy to give it out there, and I'm happy to give it to people, and I'm happy to pick up the phone for people like you too, to just get that ball rolling and give you that confidence. And that's something that people forget too. You do have to believe in yourself. And if you do have that 20, 30 years experience, you do need to know that that's in your back pocket, and you do have the assets and the knowledge to back it up, to have that confidence to move forward. Hello, everyone. The Locksmith Security Network is completely self-funded, and we offer cool logos like our Locksmith Nation group page. Here we have t-shirts along with sweaters, hoodies, and even jackets that have this really badass crest on the back in large, and again on the front in the upper corner. We even have women's apparel. We didn't forget about the ladies either. Check out the full line of women's clothing as well. We have many different colors, including red, blue, black, white, green, gray, and much more, in a wide variety of styles, including tank tops and even hats and mugs. This month, 100% of proceeds from these sales are going to advertising against scammers. If you want to support the anti-scammer movement, please purchase below and support the cause. So move us along the story, and then tell us, let's dive back into getting started and where exactly you're at now and how you got some jobs.
So let's, so that's kind of where I was aiming to go there. So I don't have a Google listing. How do I get my business? Now, a couple of things happened, and I want to say a word about ethics to start with, because you and me, Wayne, have talked about ethics more times than I can count, it just in phone calls. And one thing I'll tell you is that if you're working for somebody, it is never ethical to solicit their clients, not ever.
No.
And if you do that, not only are you opening yourself up to, to legal problems, and liability, but your clients ultimately know that's not ethical too. So, so I'm going to tell this part of the story. So ETG, when they decided to send me on my way, they were not interested in maintaining the service at all. So the first thing that I did after I resigned was I contacted them and said, if you are not servicing your clients, do you mind if I service them?
Yeah.
And can I get it in writing?
Now, see, now that's the part that separates it, and that's the part that separates you from a lot of other people. You're asking permission, and you're going to get it in writing to cover your own assets.
Right. And the second thing is that once I had that permission in writing, I went to the clients that I knew were going to need the most support once that service was discontinued at ETG.
Mhm.
And I told and one thing you never do in this industry is you do not ever disparage anybody else in the industry for any reason, no whether you agree with them or not. This is a very small world, and um, so you don't air your laundry. And so whether you liked the people you were working for or not is irrelevant. They're still professionals in the industry. And as such, they still deserve, the respect of professionals in the industry, unless they've done something demonstrably unethical, in which case
Scam or
it's not up
failure.
to you to deal with that.
Yeah.
Um, so saying that, I moved forward and said, hey, um, I am moving on from my position there, but being your primary point of contact, I would like you to contact ETG and verify all this. But I don't believe that they are going to continue the service, and I'd like the opportunity to pick up, where we left off, if you're amenable to that. And
Yeah.
and so I ended up taking half a dozen, heavy commercial clients with me when I left, and I didn't have to do anything unethical to do that. But if you're working for somebody who you intend to compete with, that is not an option, you know. So the other steps that I took before that process was complete, um, I did a little market research. Elbert County, Colorado, has 26,000 people right now. Most of them are below the poverty line. There are no other locksmiths here. Not a single other uh, provider for what I do.
Wow.
But it is also a rural county where 90% of people turn their own screwdrivers.
Yeah.
So, um, so I knew that to begin with, I was not going to be making a ton of money out here.
Mhm.
Um, but there were a few steps that I took to start establishing myself, because the first thing I did is I sat in on a county development meeting. And I learned that the estimated population of Elbert County was going to triple in the next 5 years. And most of that was going to be high income, because they started plans to build about 70,000 new houses, all in the $1 million range, 5 acres of property, things like that. So I wanted to leverage that knowledge. And so the first thing I did is, of course, being a small community, I know a lot of people out here. At the time that I started this process, I was on the board of a nonprofit, and it was a service-based nonprofit for the county, and so I had some ties. So the first thing I did is I went around to all of the real estate companies in the area, because they're about to get busy, and I set up a promotional program with them. You guys go out and sell a house. Here's a coupon for 10% off a rekey. Okay, I'm going right back to that four-cylinder rekey cycle, but it's lucrative.
Yeah.
So every time they sell a house in Elbert County, there's one of my coupons sitting in their welcome basket. In addition to that, farmers markets are a huge thing out here.
Oh yeah.
I go park my van at the farmers markets on the weekends, and I hang out a banner, and I do $2 house keys.
Oh yeah.
And that's underpricing the market. And we all know that that's a bad idea in general,
It's
but
advertising.
it's advertising.
It,
Everybody that gets one of my keys gets one of my cards.
and then
Um,
that turns into an electronic lock, a $500 electronic lock, and that
yes.
turns into
Yeah.
maybe security or some kind of. I mean, even in those $1 million homes, I don't know about you, but I've actually been installing more commercial grade type of access on
Yes.
residential grade homes, because they're custom doors. Like, what am I going to do with a 3.5-inch thick door, for crying out loud? I got to put something commercial on this thing. It's
Absolutely.
the only thing that'll
Low
work.
voltage is an option. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and knowing your market is absolutely key. If you're starting in Denver, you have every market in the world, but boy, you better decide which market you're chasing, because everybody's chasing the market.
Yeah.
Out here, the market chooses me.
Yeah.
I am a single locksmith in a county of 26,000 people, and the questions are going to be the questions. Oh, can you make a key for my car? Oh, can you, and by the way, and this is going down a slightly dark road, so I'll keep it brief, but domestic violence is a massive problem in my county.
Yeah.
So I offered my services to the domestic violence service center in my county and to the sheriff's department.
Yes.
And I do that at a very deep discount. And if anybody bickers with the discount, I do it for free.
I don't know if
But
you knew this or not. I don't think we've discussed this before, but I do that as well. We're registered with the local advocacy center, and I don't care if you call, we get them safe and we worry about the bill later.
100%. Yeah,
That's
that's it.
all that matters. Yeah.
Billing if it's available, but if it's not, I don't care.
And do you know how many times I've had people just like absolutely just crying and so thankful? And not only that, but just to get them in a safe situation makes me feel good as a person. It's how I give back to the community. And then those people, you're a hero. You cannot get better. They will rave about this service. Oh my gosh. I
it's a mercenary level of self-service, but you're right. You do that kind of work, and your name gets out there every time. And if you're educated in trauma, in trauma sensitive care and service, they will come to you over and over again.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And being respectful and knowing how to enter that situation as a man, going back to that, showing up in a marked vehicle that shows up on your website, your face is there, you're the actual dude that shows up, like all in a domestic violence situation, all of those spidey senses are at a very, very heightened rate. And if those arrows don't line up, I could only imagine the further trauma that somebody would go through if that happened to them. And then they have some, scam company come out, or somebody with poor intentions, and then do the work and end up charging them 5, 6, 7, 10 times whatever it should have actually cost, and force the issue. I mean, that disgusts me to the point of vomiting.
And that's why it's so important to build those relationships with local law enforcement, with your local advocacy centers, things like that.
Yep.
You don't just build those relationships to get the work. You build those relationships for legitimacy, so that those people can call and say, do you know this guy? And by the way, that brings us to, Colorado and their lack of licensing. How do you prove you're a locksmith? And that's where a LOA or SOPL or Rocky Mountain Locksmith Association, those things are so important, because it's a line to legitimacy. That's a certification that you can show them that says, yes, I've done the work. I am a locksmith. I am legitimately in this field. I'm not just some guy, swinging tools off the back of his hatchback.
Yeah. Normally I have my other background up, or the back wall here, and you've seen that before. The wall behind me is just completely covered in certifications and plaques and awards.
Oh yeah, I've seen
everything
that.
else. Like it, I earned those, and I am proud of it. And you're exactly right. Those associations. I'm the Southwest board director for Aloha currently, running for president as well, to help try and alleviate those things and try and help that situation out. Our industry as a whole, I've been very blessed as an individual and as a businessman, but the industry now needs some help, and I think I've got some tools to help that. And I'm not trying to insert me into this. I'm just trying to say, you are right. You're right,
Wayne.
You're right. You're right. This industry needs some help in that department. And I want to give everything that I have to give for the next generation, for the next bunch of locksmiths. And while we're on that point, like, if people are really on the fence right now about what they want to do for a career, look at what AI is doing right now. I have an AI program that's built and integrated into my invoicing program to where it answers the phone. I picked up the phone the other day and listened to my AI message. It speaks Spanish. Like it automatically translates and speaks Spanish, and then it will translate it back into English and give me a transcription. And I didn't even answer the phone. Like this is just preliminary information. When one of us, when me or my tech can't answer the phone, like that's how advanced it's gotten in the last 6 months. So imagine where we're going to be in 2 to 3 years.
Right.
I can tell you, AI is taking bookkeeping jobs, attorney jobs. It's gonna be taking a lot of those internships out of there. It's gonna be taking a lot of the office people in those. You're always gonna have a person to really cross the T's and dot the I's. But it is advancing so fast that people losing their jobs is going to be very, very. That's probably going to be the next biggest crisis that we have in this country right now. And I can guarantee you that it is not taking my job. And it's
Yeah,
not taking
and
your job.
bear in mind that right now, tech workers and people that deal in data are going through 20 level interviews and then getting offered minimum wage for master's level educations. We don't have that problem, and
Nope.
we're talking about getting started in a small business here. I'm in a tiny county with very poor people and very few resources. I work the weekends, and my first quarter, netted about $16,000.
Yep.
And that working the weekends, that's a healthy amount of money for
Yeah.
somebody that's doing a nights and weekends gig.
That's
So
that's going to give you the opportunity to start being able to make that transition into full time pretty quickly.
absolutely, yeah, that's building up the company coffers and making decisions like, taking those automotive courses and expanding my services and, and being able to take more time, away from the day job to focus on building this. And, you don't there I can't think of any other industry that has that level of almost immediate profitability.
No, I can't think of one either. And just to give people an idea, like I just want to give these numbers because I want more people. We need more people in this industry. We need more educated, ethical people with integrity in this industry. And just to give people some numbers, like I said, I wanted to get to that safe work and get the high end work. I mean, I just drove over to Ray, Colorado, and we opened up a safe for almost $5,000. Now that's one day's worth of work to do that. And I was just teaching at Banner Solutions down in Houston, Texas. And I was telling those guys, I'm making attorney rates for installing a continuous hinge. This hinge cost me $125 to buy. Maybe another, whatever, call it $200. And I'm installing them for $850 and making well over $500 an hour. And it takes me 30 minutes from wheels on to check in hand and wheels off, packed up and gone.
Right.
To make that kind of money, name me another industry that you can do that in.
It's so, I mean, even plumbers and electricians, don't have that instant profitability. I mean,
Mm-mm.
my invoice 0001 for Elbert County Key Works was for $11,600. And that was a mini mall that they had 6 doors that had just been completely destroyed. Throw some marks on there, a couple of trilogies on the exterior.
Mm-hmm.
I hired my father-in-law, who was he was city management for the city of Littleton for 35 years. The guy can turn a screwdriver. He has no other applicable skills in locksmithing. I hired him for a day's work for $500 and turned that job over in a single day, and billed $11,000 on that job. And you have to know your clients and what their needs are, and that is the single key to growth, is listening to the needs of your customers.
Yep.
Because it doesn't matter how much work you can do, if you're trying to sell something they don't need, or if you're not rising to the level of their needs, you're not going to get the work. And that was a very specific case of hearing the customer's needs, hearing exactly what their concerns were, and understanding that they were willing to pay to get them handled in very short order. Not
Mm-hmm.
every invoice is like that,
No.
but developing those opportunities is paramount. And that was the funding for the first the first 90 days of my company.
Yeah. I mean, we just had, just to give you an idea too, like we were over in Colorado Springs at the military base over there, the Space Force, and they had 6 different companies come out and try and unscrew up a set of doors over there. And nobody could seem how to figure out how to get this done the way they wanted it to. And I'm like, this is simple stuff. Rehang the doors with a couple of continuous hinges, put a little electronic access on there, put it on a key switch, and let's go home, ladies and gentlemen. And because of the position that they were in, like that was an extremely lucrative job, like you said, in that, $10,000, $11,000 range. And it was because of the knowledge up here. Everybody was trying to fix the vertical linkage and the garbage that they had there. Abandon all of that,
clean it
start
up
fresh, start over. Let's clean slate this thing. And now they're super, super happy. And this was like one of those, sub of a sub of a sub of a sub. And I'm like, this is easy, guys. Let's just get it done and get out of here. And they paid and everybody was happy. They're like, why did it take us 3 months to find this guy? And why did I have to drive 4 hours to go do it?
Yeah. And a lot of the problem that you run into with those kinds of jobs is, the people that they have coming out here doing, there are hundreds of companies coming out here from Dallas, Fort Worth right now,
California,
with cookie cutter solutions that don't work. And this is a term that we're continuing to hear more and more frequently: advanced hardware support.
Yes. Yeah. The ultra complexity of it. Like you said, when you were talking about the shop that did everything back in the 90s, that was a possibility then. Now it is it's so vast. Like you almost have to kind of be specialized or kind of have to pick, like one tech cannot know everything about everything. They can't be an advanced safe technician, an advanced access control technician, an advanced automotive technician, and an advanced commercial technician all at the same time. It just, there's way too many rabbit holes to go down now.
And that brings to another, how does a small operation like mine handle that? And the bottom line is, I don't mess with automotive right now, but I made pals with the best automotive programmer in Eastern Colorado.
Yeah.
He'll drop everything, come out and do a car. Same thing with, I've made an arrangement with an astoundingly good safe technician. I stay in my lane, because the one thing that a lot of guys forget is that it is okay to delegate. It is okay. Managing a company doesn't mean doing everything. It's okay. You're going to make your client happier if you delegate to someone who can handle their problem. Even if you have an arrangement to do a little bump and pay for it and you make a few bucks off of it, but ultimately, even if you can't do that, they're still going to be happier that you put them with the right people, and they're going to call you first next time.
Yeah, exactly. Those are all such great points. I mean, and that doesn't mean you have to lose the sale either. Like you said, I know a great automotive guy, and hey, guess what? We need a key done for this. I call him up. Hey, what do you need to make you whole on this job? And then you can add a little bit to it. And there you go. I've done that several times, even with big safe moves or vault opens. Hey, I may not have all of those pieces, but I know the person who has the missing piece that I don't have, and together we'll tag team it. And at the end of the day, all the customer wants is a result. If people, this is the number one piece of business advice that I could give to anybody in this situation. People pay for results. Start charging for results and stop charging for hourly rate. Charge for the entire job to be done. Oh, you need this, you need 18 doors outfitted with electronic access control, and you need these features, and you need these back doors.
Here's your price.
Here's your price. Done. A per door price, right?
They don't need to hear how.
Yep. They don't care how. They don't care what wire has to run. They don't care about any of that, right? And that's also when people really stop looking into, looking online. That's a big problem that people have, is they'll get a price quote from you, and then they'll want to break that invoice down and reverse engineer you and then buy their own parts. When you're talking about a complex system like that, that customer doesn't do that. They just want it done.
Right. And that's one of the reasons I don't ever put part numbers on my invoices or quotes ever. I use internal reference numbers for that
Yep. Yeah,
because
exactly.
I mean, we all know that you have companies like Truedoor that are selling a trilogy for $250. The
Yeah.
customer doesn't care that that thing has a firmware expiration 10 years prior. They want that dollar.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They just see the end user. And that's the other thing too, is you don't have, I mean, when you're starting out, yeah, I had to run after hours calls and I had to take everything that I could take to get by. But as you progress a little bit, all of a sudden, maybe getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning when you've got a full day schedule the next day and you need to run at 100% to get that $3,000 or $4,000 day done, all of a sudden that $250 lockout at 3 in the morning doesn't sound so appealing anymore.
Right.
And I'm willing to give that up to the next guy because they're tire kickers, there's a gone on arrivals. I mean, you may not even get that job, and now you're running at 70% for your big cash cow. Don't
Right.
do that if you don't have
Choose
to.
your market.
Yep, choose your market, and
Choose your
don't be
market.
afraid to fire customers. Don't be
Right.
afraid to get a better class of customer. If you have a customer, anytime I find myself complaining about a customer, more more than once or twice, I ask myself, is this customer really worth it? Or could I not use them? And could I get a better quality class of customer that just says, we need this project done. We trust you. Don't rip us off, but just get it done. And everybody's got to eat. That's my customer. That's my
Right.
client.
And there are enough guys out here running lockouts. That's not a market I
Yeah.
necessarily need. There
Yep.
are enough guys out here, drilling locks off of people's doors. I don't need that. But what I do need to do, and it's so very, very important in my particular market, I need to be a neighbor.
Yeah.
I need to do everything I can to make sure the guy down the street is getting what he needs,
Yeah.
because and part of that job is protecting them from the scammers.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, it's in it's different when you're working in a large market. You start working in these tiny little rural markets, you really have to play on that whole. I mean, you've seen my Facebook post, you see my van rolling down the street, wave, because we're neighbors.
Right.
That's an important optic in my area. And and it all goes back to know your market. Know
Yep.
where you're working, know the people you're working for, because you know what, if you're in you're in Denver, you're in LA, you're in St. Louis, nobody cares who you are. You have to compete based on your speed, your skill, your price, and your reputation. you know
Yep.
I don't face those challenges, but boy, if I slip up, this neighbor talks to that neighbor, and that neighbor talks to the mayor, and
Mhm. Oh yeah, a small town, word travels fast, and that's both your competitors and your clients as well. I mean, it just
absolutely.
travels like wildfire. I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. I really, really do thank you, and I know that there is somebody who is in the position that you were in February and is in that 30-day buffer zone, just sitting on the fence right now. What would you tell that person right now?
you know um I guess I kind of have a three-way answer to that. The first one is you are absolutely worth the effort. Don't ever doubt that.
Mhm.
You've spent you as a skilled professional have spent so much time gaining so much knowledge. Just because an employer doesn't value you or can no longer afford you does not mean that your value is less. Predicate all of your effort on that. Okay. The second thing I would say is you may be in a position where you have to move fast. Don't be afraid to pick up other work, and that's something I've done. I've picked up other work so I can support myself while I'm planning properly. My second piece of advice is plan, plan, plan. Don't do it on the fly.
Yep.
Plan, uh, build steps to success. Ask people, talk to people, take on mentorship. Don't take a shady business loan to make it happen.
No.
Work hard for it, because if you are worth it, so is your business. It's worth doing right the first time.
Yep.
And the third piece of advice that that I would give is be flexible. And I mean emotionally flexible, physically flexible. Um, and um, and remember that you're ultimately doing this to gain success. If you're destroying your emotional state, if you're destroying your body, if you're destroying your marriage, if you're destroying your relationship with your family, your kids, it's not going to work out. Start from, y- there's going to be a feeling of desperation when somebody tells you there's the door.
Yep.
Um, it's okay to take 2 steps back, plan, gather yourself in, acknowledge your value, strengthen your resources, and man, hit the wall running. And I say hit the wall running because it ain't a road. It's going to be one wall after another.
It is.
Don't get frustrated when problems arise. There are tons of resources that can help you with every little thing, whether that's business planning, networking, finances, taxation. One of the things that I learned really quick, because I do a lot of work for the Department of Revenue in Colorado,
Mhm.
they don't want to take your stuff. You have
No.
a problem, you call, make calls, communicate. Find other people that are doing what you're doing. Ask questions, be friends. Competition in the market doesn't mean enmity. And I
Yep.
think, Wayne, you, me, all the guys here in Denver that do the yearly get together meal, all of that is about developing those relationships outside of the bounds of the competition. Because you and me aren't really competition. We're 300 miles apart. But the other guys that sit down at that table, those are my competition. But ultimately, there's enough business out here for everybody.
Yeah.
Make friends with those guys.
Oh, yeah.
Value yourself, plan, and stay flexible, and don't let it get you down, because it is a hard market. There is nothing easy about starting a business. you
Nope.
know there are components that are easy, but you will never be everything.
Oh,
And unfortunately, you have to wear a lot of hats running a business. But um, if you try to go it alone, you try to cut everybody out of your market. You're adversarial. You're contrary. You're trying to undercut everybody. You're not going to last. It's a community. Treat it as such, and ultimately, um, make your name on your ethics, your skills, and your capabilities. Don't make your name on your prices. Don't
mhm,
make your name by bringing down the next guy down the road.
mhm.
And don't make your name by being the cheap, fast handyman guy on the block.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
my advice.
That's beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself. I think you hit every single nail right on the head. You're either gonna fail to plan, and then you can plan on failing. That's all there is to it. There's no way around it. If you don't have a well-established plan, and you have to have, I always work backwards. Whether I'm planning a project, a single project, or whether I'm planning life goals or business goals, I do the maze backwards, and I figure out what the goal is, and I figure out how I need to get there from here. Because if you don't have a roadmap, then you're going to get lost, basically, is what's going to happen. If you don't have an end result and an end goal in mind, then how do you even know if you're hitting those KPIs, key performance indicators, along the way? If you don't have a goal to shoot for, then what are you actually doing this for? And I also really like that you added the family element to it there as well. If what are we killing ourselves for, if not to support our family? And what good is supporting them if you don't spend any time with them, and you don't acknowledge them, and you continually push them off? Oftentimes, all too many times, that's the first thing, because it's the easiest to push aside. Oh, I got to get that next dollar. Oh, I got to get this next call. At some point in time, you have to just turn that phone off. You have to be able to just realize that that fire can burn itself out. And then I need to deal with what I've got going on, and I need to give my family the respect that they deserve, because it's all for naught if they're not here with you.
And it's easy to put your family off because they're the ones that are most likely to accept you doing so. A business partner isn't going to accept that.
Mhm.
Uh, the people that you're working for, the people that you're working with, they don't accept a lack of presence. But your family will typically accept that because they know what you're trying to do. Don't fall into that trap.
Yep. And well, what'll happen is that they will accept it, but over time it will callous and it will turn into resentment. And then
Absolutely.
all of a sudden you find yourself with, divorce, or your kids don't, know you, or you missed too many family events. And even as busy as I am, I still always make sure I'm at my kids' games. If they're needed, or if they call, hey, I need you, Dad. Okay, that's it. Drop everything, and I'm gonna bust over there and get it done. If it's date night with wifey, that phone's getting turned off. That's all there is to it.
One of the best pieces of advice that I got before I got married, and I got married very late in life. My first marriage started at 39. I'm currently 45. And one of the best pieces of advice I got, and I've applied this across business as well, is the rule of thirds. You know,
Yep.
you hear young guys talking about, respect the hustle, 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 hustle. And you know what? I can respect that. I can. But the rule of thirds, you divide your time and you make sure that fully one third of your life is dedicated to, growing the family connections and the personal relationships in your own time, and rest.
Yeah.
Right now I'm working 7 days a week, but
Mhm.
I'm carving out specific times to rest, to reconnect with my wife. She appreciates that I'm bringing home checks, but she doesn't appreciate it if she can't look me in the eye. So, you
Yep.
young men out there that are respecting the hustle, you're getting out there and you're really getting down on it. You know what? That's great, man. And especially if you don't have, you haven't built a family yet, but don't fall into the trap of, doing, hustling hard until you find yourself in your 30s and you have a lot of money and nothing else.
That's right. Yep.
Divide your time out and dedicate at least a third of your time to personal growth, personal relationships, um, you know, rest, and do whatever you got to do the other 2/3 of the time, man. But if you don't, you will burn yourself out. You will,
And your bridges, and your
yeah,
bridges.
your bridges, because hustle is respected for a long time until it starts affecting the people around you, and then it becomes a joke.
Yep.
And so, self development, self preservation, and even if you don't intend to have build a family, get married, have kids, things like that, not everybody has to do that. That's not for Take that time for yourself.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's referred to. I've actually put a whole PowerPoint presentation on that. And it's called the Wheel of Life. And yet the main idea is to give people perspective. Is you would draw a circle, and then you would draw those three spokes out from the center, and you would put finances or work in one category, personal, yourself, and then friends and family in the other. And you would determine about how long each one of those lines is as a percentage as you dedicate to each category. And if your wheel looks like this, or looks like an oval, just imagine putting that on a race car. You're not going to go very
It's
fast.
going to be shaky.
It's going to be shaky, right? At 10 miles an hour. Now you balance that out perfectly, and you get the good rest that you need, and you get that re-energizing. A lot of that confidence comes from your family. A lot of that
Mhm.
confidence comes from their support, and you need to be there to engage with it, to get that support and kind of recharge your batteries, if you will. And if it's really balanced, then you can do, 300 miles an hour, and you can just keep running and taking names, but it takes a lot to get that balance out.
Yeah. And when you're starting a business, sometimes all those things aren't really possible, but you expect, the first you expect that first year to be kind of rough.
Yeah.
But if you start a business and you get past that first couple of years and you're still struggling, shift gears, change tactics, ask, develop, find other ways, because you're never going to get anywhere driving yourself into the ground.
No, for all the guys that grind, and I'm a grinder. I just grind and grind and grind and grind. Guess what? At the end of the day, what happens when you keep grinding?
Yeah,
There's nothing,
but you
but
still have
there's
time to have
nothing
dinner with the
left.
guys.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing left if you grind too much. You grind yourself into a little nub, and then it's all done.
Yeah.
Just to give everybody out there some last little pieces of advice from my point of view too. Something that I found later, and I wish I would have started much, much earlier, is you can literally have your own university and your own college degree if you download an Audible account and start listening to books. You can listen to books that on personal development. You can listen to books on tax laws. You can listen to books on how to start a business, how to advertise your business, how to SEO marketing, all of those different things. If there is a subject that you're struggling with, number one, you have to identify it and say, this is an area where I am not strong at. This is a weakness, and I'm going to turn that into my power by learning somebody else's problems and struggles along the way, because books compress decades into days. I've learned so much more from the Ford University of just listening to, Bedros Cooley and Man Up is a wonderful book on business, entrepreneurship, and startup. Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The list just goes on and on and on. And I highly recommend pick those books up.
Yeah. And I'll add to that. Audible, fantastic. Libby, unbeatable. Libby is a library program. You download the app, plug in your library card, and you have access to any and all text and audio resources from that library district. I have Libby, and I have 3 different library cards in it, and I have 74,000 audiobooks for free right there. So if you don't have the green to get yourself an Audible right off the bat, get Libby.
Podcast. That's great too.
Podcasting, yeah.
I mean, there's actually an overabundance of information right now. What there is a lack of is quality content that is applied properly. And you are the one who has to apply it properly. And if you don't, you can have all the information in the world, but knowledge is actually not power. Knowledge is potential power. And until you get the ability to apply the knowledge, that's when it really takes off.
Yeah. You can read all you want, but if you don't ever apply it, you're never going to get anywhere with it. And I tell you, years ago, one of the guys that mentored me in the industry, and some of the guys that listen to this might know this name, a gentleman named Kevin Griffin, currently runs Griffin Safe and Vault, I think, in Thornton, Colorado. I don't remember, but one of the things he told me very, very early in my career, he said, there's going to be a cacophony of voices telling you all sorts of things and ways to do whatever. He said, take what you can use for every one of them, throw away the rest, and move on. And it seemed like a pretty brusque way to put it, but boy, all you have to do is jump on Locksmith Nation, see how many people have something to say about any given job, and that advice starts being extremely useful. Take what you can use, disregard the rest, and thank everybody for the input.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep. And that's just it. And it shows you that there's more than one way to skin that particular cat, but it also shows you, hey, at the end of the day, you know what? It doesn't matter what anybody else says. I'm the one that has to select the option that's going to work best for me. And I'm the one that has to hang my name on that job and take responsibility for it at the end of the day. Just because you got bad advice doesn't mean that it's their fault. You're the one that chose to accept it, and you're the one that chose to apply it in the manner that you did. And we all have to take responsibility for that as well.
Right. And you can have whole podcast on craftsmanship, quality of work,
That'll be another one for another day, for sure, for sure. There's one thing that we also have to say before we get done with this one here. We're coming up on about an hour and a half, and this has been an amazing hour and a half. This is a 90-minute masterclass on how to start your business. The one thing I do want to really drive home is financing. When you do get your financing, no matter how much you get, whatever you put together, if you have $10,000 snugged away, that's great and that's fine. My advice, and tell me if you agree with this, would be to split that into thirds. It is going to cost more and it is going to take longer than whatever you think. You can pretty much plan on doubling whatever you think you're gonna get as far as money wise goes, or you're going to spend, and it's going to take twice as long. So I say take that money, put a third of it into a direct checking account that is your main expense operating account, and budget for that third of money. Take the other, put it in a savings account. You will need it. You will need to tap into that, and take the other third and put it in a completely separate bank account. And that is your reserve pond. That is your life preserver at the end of your rope. When everything hits the fan, that will save you. And I know it saved me.
It's really good advice. And and the way you divided it out is a little different than the way I did. And there's different schools of thought on this. But the rule of thirds is always a good rule. It doesn't matter how you apply it. My thirds are taxes, parts and maintenance, parts for my jobs and maintenance for my vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And the other third is completely incidental. It's typically anything left in that last third is my owner's draw. But it's for anything emergent, anything that is unforeseen, paying my overhead. And I have very little overhead, but you know what? That insurance comes in every month. The fees for my certifications, they come in every month. So the way I divide my thirds is a little bit different, but it's good advice. And I especially like your advice on choosing a separate bank for a third, because financial systems are not very steady right now. And so, and this is where I do my business through credit unions, and there's a variety of reasons, and a lot of people don't agree with that. But ultimately, they're on a separate financial system, and one that I believe is slightly more solid. But yeah, I got some spare funding sitting in the good old First Bank account,
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so that is extremely good advice. And however you divide up your thirds, do it responsibly, but it is fantastic advice to make sure that your resources are diversified, spread just a little bit. And, the best rule is never to have all your eggs in one basket, no matter what you're talking about, whether it's, your knowledge, your resources, your finances, your tools, your inventory. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Always that rule of thirds is going to save you more often than you could ever imagine.
It absolutely did for me. I mean, I was just establishing some credit with PayPal and took a loan out that I didn't even need, because the time when to take the money out and when to get a loan is when you don't need it. Because when you need it, it's already too late, unfortunately. Well, I wanted to pay that off early. And so the last payment was, it was $600, right? And so I was like, yeah, just pay it all off now. We're going to get it paid, 3 weeks early. And that's going to be great. I'm establishing great rapport and great opportunity here. Well, they decided to add a few zeros to that and hit my account for $60,000. $60,000. Completely drained everything. Couldn't make payroll. And then now that's my merchant service account. So all of my money is just going into this giant black hole of doom. And then it sucked my savings out as an overage coverage. And yes, we did get it figured out, but it took more than 7 business days to do that. So like, if you can't put fuel in your van and you can't make payroll and you lose an employee over that, it's crazy. So the fact that I had a completely separate bank, I was able to just divert checks and cash checks and just completely turnkey start operating business out of that account until the other one could get fixed. And then we basically froze it. They finally sorted everything out. But that is a real world example of how, something can just take you like that. I can't tell you how many times I've seen guys on Locksmith Nation, a van lost a transmission and they're out of business.
They're
Like
done.
they're done. That's
Yeah.
not an uncommon thing. A transmission for a van should be something that you can handle. You need to be
Right.
able to prepare for that.
Well, so we've been talking about resources, both educational resources and and things like that. I think you should take a couple of minutes to just plug all the resources that you have out there because even as self-sufficient as I am, I've used a lot of the resources you've put out there, and we're sitting here talking for an hour and a half about mentorship and resources and learning and education, and you're the guy that has so many of those resources sitting around. Why don't you plug them, man?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm glad you brought it up and not me. There is Locksmith Nation. That's a wonderful resource. It's a free group on Facebook for locksmiths. There's an automotive group. There's a safe group. Extremely valuable resource. I do Wayne's Lock Shop, wayneslockshop.com, which is a training facility, on-demand training. If you're looking for safe opening, home safe opening, antique safe opening, electronic access, quick set smart keys, all that fun stuff. I make education. My mission in life is to make education accessible and affordable for those who are qualified to receive it. That is my mission statement in life, and that's what I'm here for, to help out. And then I do business coaching too. If somebody wants to, talk to me for a little bit and let's run over a profit and loss report, and you want to level up, maybe you're doing 100 or 200,000 and you want to jump up to $500,000, or you're at half and you want to hit that 7-figure mark. Those are some of the things that I do with my business coaching programs.
Yeah, and and on that note, everybody that's in this industry should, we spoke a little bit early in the conversation about how close to the chest a lot of guys played it in the early days,
Mhm.
and if you've been successful in this industry, if you have knowledge in this industry, if you have skill sets, it is so important to mentor the next generation coming into this.
Yeah.
And by doing that, we put us we make it tougher for the scammers to continue. We
Standards.
make it, we so when that younger locksmith pops up and asks what you consider to be the dumbest question in the world, take a step back and remember that everybody has to learn, and a lot of us struggled learning in our early years because it was so hard to get skilled guys to talk about the trade, to teach the trade, because because they felt like it would take food out of their mouths, money out of their pockets. So we live in a time when our trade is so necessary, and there's so much business out there for everybody. Just remember, mentorship and passing that knowledge on is so important. It's so important in this industry. And we don't have structured apprenticeships like plumbing and electricians and things like that. We're also one of the lowest paid trades in the United States. The locksmithing, when you do that job hourly for somebody, you're not making a plumber's
Mhm.
salary. It's
Mhm.
pretty low. So remember, that younger locksmith, that less experienced locksmith, somebody coming into the industry and trying to grow, um, mentor those people.
Yep.
It's the right thing to do. It's going to help us grow, and ultimately, when those people grow into the industry, they're going to improve the industry. And right now, locksmithing has come into a time of crisis. Locksmithing, security work, even access control, advanced hardware, Division 8, the whole industry is essentially under attack by people that don't care, that don't license, that don't learn, that undercut our pricing, that they've turned this industry into a mockery of a very honorable, very old trade.
Yep.
And so remember that when you're successful and knowledgeable and have this knowledge, it needs to be passed down. These
It
people
does.
are not always your competition; they're your peers. And
Mhm.
so, if you take anything away from these podcasts, it's that that we have to work together as an industry to improve not only the optics from the outside world, but the quality of the craftsmanship coming up, coming into the trade. We live in a time where so many contractors are hiring minimum wage installers. you know they're hiring, they're hiring people with criminal backgrounds to go do this work. They're, the care of the integrity of this industry has failed in the last couple of decades. It's up to us to bring that up. So, the next time that young locksmith, that new business owner steps in and says, "Hey, I know this question might be kind of off, but man, I need some help here."
Yeah, help them
You
out. Help them out.
help
And
them.
and the answer, call a locksmith. You know what? The other thing is too, that person is going to be the one in 5 or 10 years that might be the one that might have the answer that you need when it's all electronic and you don't know how to, log into something, or you don't know something. I can't tell you how many times that it's come full circle to where I've been asked questions and then given a lot of information and helped a lot of people out, and then needed those same exact people a couple years later, because now that's their specialty and I need information back from them, and we're just here to help each other out, man. This doesn't need to be the crabs in a bucket scenario where everybody is trying to pull everybody else down. We can actually help lift each other up, and it's our job. I look at it like this. It's our job. I'm in the prime right now. We set the standards to help other people raise the bar even higher. So,
Yeah, this has been a really fantastic conversation.
man, I really, really appreciate it. There's probably, I can count on one hand the amount of people that have your expertise, knowledge, kindness, and integrity and ethics. And that's being 100% true. And I'm really, really, really thankful to have you on this podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know beyond the shadow of a doubt, it's going to give one person, at least one person, probably way more than that, but it's going to give at least one person that confidence to go ahead and do what you've done and to change their entire life. So any last words from you, my friend?
No, it's been, it's you and me have worked together really well for a long time, and I feel, I feel the same way. I feel like we're just counterparts on opposite sides of the mountain out here. So, and I just say, anybody listening to this podcast, reach out to Wayne, to me. you know. We're all out here. Any of the moderators on Locksmith Nation. All of these people share a similar mission, and so it's a pleasure having this chat with you. It's been a lot of fun sitting here and kind of hashing out what we do pretty much every month. We end up on a phone call like this, and it's nice to put it into a structured kind of a structured output. And I look forward, if you're doing a lot more of these, I look forward to weighing in on some other topics. It should be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Anytime you got something, I'll be more than happy to have you back. But like I said, there's people would pay. I've seen and heard people pay thousands of dollars for the information that we just discussed here. And I really hope people take that home and actually apply the knowledge and put it to use and do something with it. Go out there and run with it. Run with it, everybody. Thank you so much.
My gift to the industry.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Bryan. It's been a true pleasure to have you here, and I'm sure that we'll chat again. To everybody else out there, the audience, you can do it. Believe in yourself. Believe in your skills. Get out there, kick some butt, and take some names.
You're worth it.
Yep, you're worth it. Thanks so much.
All right, we'll see you, Wayne.
Thanks. Welcome to the Locksmith Security Network. LSN is your powerful resource, hosted by Wayne Winton for all things locksmith and security.